Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Dennis Heil, and I am diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder with severe depression and high functioning autism. I've been living with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, 15 of which I spent undiagnosed. In 2009, I experienced a depressive psychotic break that led to my diagnosis of type 2 bipolar disorder. I would be diagnosed with autism a few years later. In my podcast, Bluntly Bipolar, I'm going to share with you my experiences and the hard lessons I've learned trying to find some peace and happiness in my life. I hope that by sharing my experiences, others can avoid learning these lessons the hard way. I'm not a mental health professional. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone. Listener discretion is advised. Anger played a pivotal role in feeding my bipolar disorder and depression, as well as complicating social and emotional matters through my high functioning autism. In this mini-series prefixed on anger, I'll be exploring the role anger played in my mental wellness and how it was used as a weapon to manipulate me as a straight white man from a blue-collar working-class background. This is On Anger. What is deconstruction? My deconstruction journey started when I was 29 years old due to a horrific mixed cycle in which my brain told me that I needed to project the rage I felt at the world. I reasoned that if I couldn't be happy, even though I had every reason to be happy, then nobody else should too. Everyone else should feel like I did. Now, up until that point, it was mostly self-contained. I aimed most of my own ire at myself for my choices. But my brain had ran screaming into psychosis, and that caused me to question my own reality when I fortunately crashed out of it. It allowed me to finally see just how bad my mental health was and realize the way I was living wasn't going to work. Now, I had made the decision that I was going to throw open the doors to the darkest parts of my brain and let a mental health professional actually see what was inside. Now, it was my hope that someone else could understand what was going on, because I didn't at the time. Now, that started a long journey of self-examination and unraveling myself. But it didn't necessarily start there, because at the same time that all of that was happening and everything was falling apart, my ex was in the process of leaving me. She gave numerous reasons as to why, but one of the reasons is that she wanted to explore other relationships under sexuality. And that actually made me stop and think, because all my life up to that point, I had imagined myself to be a monogamous straight dude. But after the breakup, and as I was sorting through that situation years later, I started to realize that I didn't really care that much about monogamy. It wouldn't have bothered me to open up the relationship because unless I'm unwell, I'm not a jealous person. And it seemed very short-sighted to expect someone to amputate a part of themselves just to be in a relationship with me. And then I started to wonder, why did I believe that about myself in the first place? No one told me I should be monogamous, not directly exactly. I had that modeled for me in relationships I saw, and living in a conservative area, particularly in the 90s, it was pretty much assumed. But one thing that's always been consistent for me in relationships is that I always wanted to see my partner fly. I didn't want them to ever look at me with resentment over sacrifices they made for me. The things I heard neurotypical people discussing about relationships just didn't make sense to me a lot of the times. Like, what do you mean you don't want your wife to be educated or earn money? What do you mean you want someone who will just blindly follow your lead? What do you mean that you need to monitor your partner at all times? None of it made sense to me, and all of it sounded like an excessive amount of work that was doomed to failure. But then, I also had that social naivete about the world. I didn't understand that a lot of people weren't looking for authentic love and support. Instead, they were lonely, or they just wanted someone present in the role of girlfriend or wife, or husband or boyfriend or whatever. Alternatively, they may have viewed their partner as just a status symbol to other men in society. Oh, he's a family man. That's also a thing. Now, I grew up with a golden rule from my upbringing: do unto others as you would have done unto you. And I failed at following that rule a lot. Quite a lot of it was due to mental illness, but plenty of it was also due to bad decisions, selfishness, and just being a flawed human being. I'd love to be able to blame all my bad actions on my mental illness, but no, sometimes I'm just not a good person. That said, the golden rule kind of underpinned all of my close relationships. I wouldn't ask or demand something from someone I wasn't willing to give, and I hold that standard for myself too. For example, if my partner wanted my phone password to go through it, I would comply with that if I could do the same with theirs. Fair is fair, right? I wouldn't want anyone else to treat me in a one-sided fashion, let alone someone that claimed to love me. Why would I do that to someone I claim to love? What right do I even have to do that? Why would I ever entertain the idea that it was my right to do that to another person? That is where we come to the term deconstruction. Deconstruction is actually a pretty simple concept. All it means is to understand why you think the way you do, feel the way you feel, and act the way that you do. The main idea being that you can't fix a problem unless you understand why it's happening. It's not enough to just understand that there is a problem. It's very important to understand why the problem exists. Now, this concept is so important in mental health because of how complex and intertwined it all is. There are a lot of mental illnesses that get misdiagnosed because they share similarities. Like, it's extremely common for people with bipolar disorder to get misdiagnosed with depression and anxiety, and vice versa. If you don't get to the why of the matter, then you may end up just treating the symptom instead of the problem. But let me put it in a different context. Let's say you go out to your car and you turn the key and it won't start. Immediately, you're confronted with the most important question: why is this problem happening? To troubleshoot, you start with the battery. When you turn the key, the starter is supposed to fire up the engine using power from the battery. Then, while the car is in operation, the alternator is supposed to recharge the battery. Now, if you turn the key and you only hear a click, you'd start by testing the battery. You test the voltage of the battery and it's completely dead. No voltage. Okay, so you need a new battery, right? Well, not so fast. Because why did the battery go dead? Was it just old? Did you leave the lights on? Was it extremely cold out? Maybe it was a manufacturing defect. Batteries don't just go dead for no reason. Now, it could be that the alternator went bad. Now, if the alternator went bad, then the battery is not going to recharge when the vehicle's in operation. You're going to buy a new battery, install it, and that battery will die too. Now, the right thing to do at this point is to have the system tested to make sure it's only the battery. Otherwise, you're just going to be flushing money down the drain as you replace batteries. That can happen in mental health a lot because people don't necessarily get to the why of what they're experiencing. Instead, they keep treating the symptoms that pop up, replacing battery after battery after battery after battery, and don't make progress because they never got to the why of the situation to find out that, oh, hey, the alternator is bad. I have to replace that before I replace the battery. That is deconstruction in a nutshell. But instead of troubleshooting your car, you're troubleshooting your brain, your life, your experiences, your choices, and most importantly, why you've made the choices that you made. Why do you believe what you do? Where did it come from? Is this a choice you made, or is it something you learned from social expectations? Now, in my case, I did what a lot of people do. I looked at what was going on around me, and I acted according to those values and examples without ever really thinking about where they came from. I did not choose many of my beliefs or behaviors intentionally early in my life. As I got older, and particularly as I started working in marketing and taking a greater interest in propaganda and public relations, I started to see more and more of how my beliefs were cultivated by other people, not to benefit me, but to benefit the wealthy few. Now, building that awareness is not just valuable for self-improvement, but also for my long-term mental illness management. Now, understanding where my thoughts and behaviors were coming from helps me spot unwellness earlier. I have a better chance of noticing something is off because I have a solid understanding of where it's coming from and why I feel how I feel. So when I start believing or feeling things that don't align with what I know about myself, I know I need to start troubleshooting. Am I getting unwell? Am I just changing my mind? Have I learned new things? What exactly is going on that is causing me to believe or think these different things? And I can give you a good example of that because I legitimately thought that everyone had suicidal thoughts until I actually went to therapy at 29 years old. In retrospect, it's ridiculous. Of course, not everyone has suicidal thoughts, but suicidal thoughts were normal for me. So I wrongly concluded that everyone else must have them too. I just thought I was handling it poorly. I thought that I just needed to be a man, suck it up, and commit to the grind. That was what I saw growing up in the Rust Belt. And, what went on in your head didn't really matter. Suck it up, cupcake. We have work to do. But I have those thoughts because I have bipolar disorder. And suicidal thoughts and ideation are just part of that package for a lot of us. If they were ever to resurface again, I would know that I need to start troubleshooting and understand why they're back. Now, deconstruction is often villainized because there are people who benefit from us being unaware of our unexamined actions. For example, deconstruction is often portrayed as an evil thing in religious circles because once you start asking why, then a person's faith may start unraveling. For example, if God is loving and just, then why is there child cancer? Why do people like Epstein and the monsters he facilitated exist? Why are people so awful to each other and God stays silent? And in my case, one of my major hangups was the narrative around suicide, because I started having suicidal ideation at about 13 years old, and I made my first attempt at 15. I could not understand how a just and loving God could condemn someone who felt like I did in that time to an eternity of suffering. I couldn't get over the cruelty of the idea. I'd eventually conclude that sin had to be created by a person who's never felt that way before. And I've often wondered if whoever slipped that into religious discourse had lost someone to suicide themselves. Maybe they felt it was the best way to try to keep people from taking that final step. That's the only thing that made sense to me. And then you hear messages like God has a plan or you just have to have faith. And no, I don't. I can't afford to have blind faith in anything. I have bipolar disorder with psychotic features. I can believe things that don't make rational, tangible sense to anyone other than me. Just have faith as a one-way ticket on the crazy train to spiritual psychosis. Rip Ozzy. Now, to put on my unethical marketing cap for a moment, I have a personal rule. If someone tells me that I can't ask why, I immediately need to know why. I know from my own experiences that they are most likely working an angle. If they have to stand beside just trust me, then no, I don't just trust you. I don't just trust anyone, even the people I trust. But that's a standard I hold myself to as well. I don't just trust my own thoughts and feelings without examining them. That's one of many reasons I'm very open about my mental health journey. Despite that, there are times where I don't feel like I can be open about certain things because I know it'll affect or reveal other people. But I try never to fall back on just trust me. Now, I apply that method of thinking to how I interact with my mental health professionals. I trust their education, their license, and I assume that they want to help mentally ill people for whatever personal reasons they have. However, if they can't articulate to me why I should do this or that in a way I can understand, then I question how well they understand it. That, in turn, makes me question why I should be listening to them in the first place. It's not their life. They don't have to live with the consequences if things go wrong. I do. It's my life, my sanity, and my well-being that hangs in the balance. And all too often, it's felt like mental health professionals don't necessarily understand the gravity of their position. It can feel like you aren't being heard, even if you feel like you're expressing yourself clearly. Or that they've already drawn a conclusion and you're just expected to smile and nod along. I am aware that this is a common complaint, particularly among people of color and women who do not feel heard by their mental health professions. And I've experienced it too as a, straight white dude. But even that comes with nuance because sometimes mental health care does boil down to, let's just try this medication, see if it improves the environment of your brain. Because sometimes all you can do is just try the treatment and see what happens. It sucks, but that's the way it is. And one of the hardest things I had to learn how to do was to be patient and wait while my life was on fire and burning down around me. My needing stability and wellness wasn't going to make it happen any faster. It wasn't going to make the meds work faster or the therapy to help quicker or my emotions to process more efficiently. I have to remind myself that modern mental health hasn't been modern all that long. It wasn't all that long ago where they were doing shit like dunking us in ice baths or just locking us away to forget about us. And the sun rises, the sun sets, and that's just the way it is. Only time and scientific advancement will continue to improve that. That all being said, in the next few episodes, I'm going to walk you through my own deconstruction of being a mentally ill straight white man. In the course of that, I am undoubtedly going to touch on my personal beliefs and why I believe the things that I do. I want to be clear. I'm not trying to convince you to change an opinion or adopt my beliefs. Instead, what I hope you can do is try to receive the information without judgment, so you can see the mechanisms that may be hurting your life and mental health too. You don't have to agree with me on my conclusions or beliefs. That's okay. Everyone doesn't need to fit in the same mold. Always be skeptical of anyone that requires your blind agreement, because in my professional and personal experience, anyone who insists you shouldn't ask questions is someone not to be trusted. They are definitely someone to be questioned. After all, if they had good intentions, why would it matter?